One of my viewers received a parking charge notice which he appealed and lost, and I personally think he should have won the appeal. And so this is a really nasty and really sneaky trick that apparently some car park management companies are perhaps unwittingly applying on their car parks. I say perhaps unwittingly because maybe it's just a symptom of technology and not deliberate to trick you into overstaying and getting a parking charge notice. But you may think otherwise. But if you're new to me, I'm Daniel Smith, a barrister of England and Wales, and I've done a great deal of consumer cases, and this is a consumer case. If you are acting in the capacity of a consumer when you're parking your car, which is probably most people, but obviously a lot of people drive business vehicles, but we'll not go into the definitions too much in this video. Suffice to say, if they want to say that you're not a consumer, it's for the business to prove it, not for you to prove that you are a consumer. But more about that later. But this particular one involved this company here, which is APCOA Parking Management, whatever, however you pronounce that, APCOA Parking. Now, I was able to confirm something on the website here, but I was not able to confirm it on the app because it wouldn't let me register. So I can't confirm what my viewer told me happened on the app, because it wouldn't let me register. I tried a number of times, and then it said it won't send any more PIN codes to my phone because it would only send 3, and it didn't send any of them because they didn't arrive, so that's not a good start. Nonetheless, so my viewer regularly uses this car park and usually pays in advance and, planning ahead. He said he always uses this app to pay for the parking, normally paying for 3 or 4 days at a time. On this occasion, he arrived just after midnight and paid for 4 days, assuming that that would include the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday and Friday until the same time on the Saturday morning. So 4 full days. And the reason for that belief is that the app sold the parking as days, not in a number of hours. So one might assume that 1 day is 24 hours. So he chose 4 days parking, assuming that that would cover the amount needed. But by a quirk of the terms and conditions, which he did receive by a text message, it said that the day finishes at 4 a.m. Now, with the day finishing at 4 a.m. and he arriving just after midnight, you've probably guessed by now that having paid for that day, his parking ended for that first day at 4 a.m. So that ultimately meant that his parking was not for 4 days, as he at first thought, but rather 3 days and 4 hours. So you can see the confusion here, but the reason that he believed that it was paying by the day is because the app said to pay by the day. Now, one might reasonably assume that 1 day is 24 hours worth of parking, and one might reasonably assume that you've occupied the car park for 4 days and you've paid for 4 days. That's absolutely fine. Not the case. They would have expected him to pay for 5 days, and so he received a parking charge notice. Now, when he lost the appeal, he just paid up because he didn't want the hassle of going to court and so on and so forth. However, if we take a quick look at the Consumer Rights Act, which governs consumer contracts, again, more about the distinctions in another video, but looking at the Consumer Rights Act here, there is a section under 69 that says if terms have different meanings, then it will fall in favour of the consumer. It says, if a term in a consumer contract or a consumer notice could have different meanings, the meaning that is most favourable to the consumer is to prevail. So if you've paid for 1 day, but another term says the day ends at 4 a.m., then those are 2 different meanings. One might be that you've paid for a day, but the other term means that you've paid for 4 hours if you've arrived after midnight. So this, apparently, when I did a bit of Googling around, I've never come across this myself, but when I did a bit of Googling around, this seems to be a fairly common thing. And so a lot of people seem to be caught out by this only if they fall into that trap of having arrived very late in the day, as in a few hours before the day finishes at 4 a.m. And in anyone's reasonable understanding, a day doesn't finish at 4 a.m. A day finishes at midnight. And so one might again reasonably assume that the day finishes at midnight, and so you pay anywhere between midnight and midnight for the following day, and therefore that's the 1 day. But not so in this case. So he paid for 4 days. Actually, it meant 3 days and 4 hours, and thus received a parking charge notice. Now, From my research, this is yet to be fully tested in court. Now, of course, the Beavers and Parking Eye case went to court, but that obviously was the same year that the Consumer Rights Act came in and replaced the previous unfair terms in contracts regulations. But the Consumer Rights Act has a very clear section here that says if a term can have different meanings, then the most favourable to the consumer will prevail. So I believe that it would be very reasonable for a court to fall down inside of the consumer in a case such as this, because the consumer, an ordinary reasonable consumer, might believe that that means 1 full day, not 4 hours, unless it's absolutely clear and crystal clear. So it depends on how clearly those messages came through. It depends how prominent those terms were. But that will fight against how clear the terms were on the app that said you're paying for 1 day. So my message for this video is beware of that. But if you do end up with one of those, obviously check that the car park is a member of one of the trade bodies and therefore they can actually get the notice to keep her out to you and so on. Obviously it's different in Scotland, and if you do fancy fighting it, let me know what happens, because I'd be really interested in what a court says. Even though a county court judgment will not be binding on all future cases, it will be a very good indication and perhaps something to rely on as persuasive evidence going forward. So let me know if that's happened to you. Do watch out for that little trap and trick. Whether it's deliberate and nefarious, I'm not sure, but nonetheless it does catch people out, apparently, because I've been looking it around and lots of people have fallen for this and got parking charge notices. So if you've been in that situation, you've actually followed it all the way to court, let me know, and let me know what you think of this in the interim. So please do like the video and subscribe. As always, thank you for watching.